All right, so we are live. So welcome. So in the Solution Life Facebook group, you're watching this. This is Dr. Heather and Dr. Steve again. So we're going to be talking today about what are things that we can do for longevity and to reduce illness risk. And how this is going to work is, as you're watching us talk about some of this information, I want you to hopefully interact with us by clicking in the comment section. And you can just type in whatever questions that you may have, or if you currently are experiencing specific symptoms, or if you've been labeled, right, by a doctor with something. This is a great place for us to kind of discuss some information about what that label means for you and what are some options beyond the typical medicine route of this drug for that symptom, right? So we can get a little bit deeper if you participate and comment in this section. So awesome, let's jump right into it. I'll set the framework. So like all previous videos and information I've posted, a lot of information discusses, how our current medical system in every which way, I believe, and I'm sure, Dr. Heather shares this same sentiment, which is it is pretty broken, right? It's still operating under the system of let's collect some data using a system that's 40 plus years old and really hasn't been updated. And we're only going to collect less than 5% of the available data. And we're really letting the labs, like a sheet of paper, tell us what's normal and not normal. And we gloss over it. And if nothing's in the red, then quickly we'll tell you you're fine so I can move on to the next patient. But if something's in the red, I will use my strongly influenced brain, because drug reps have been knocking on my door for the last X number of years. I've been practicing to buy me lunch. I will match that drug with that symptom in that column that you are read in, right? That's how I see medicine right now, right? And so, and now, granted, the caveat is that's the system. I'm not saying doctors are quote unquote not doing their thing. That's just a system that they operate in. I think every doctor has the best intentions to help humans. It's just that they're operating in what is a pharmaceutical and insurance controlled system right now. And so some things that we're going to talk about in this video is, well, what are some options outside of that system, right? And what's interesting is that I just spoke yesterday at this event. It's like the future of medicine. Imagine if we could test for things way before you ever get it, and test for things accurately to see if you have it, and also actually, look at the root cause of the things and then remove the root cause. And guess what happens when we remove the root cause? Your body basically removes all symptoms of that thing. That's like the future of medicine that's available like today, right? It's actually been available for many years. And so what's exciting about this is if you're watching this, you're like, I wish the future was here now. Well, the good news is it's here, right? Like it's available right now. And so with all that framework, my question, Heather, is let's talk about what are some tests that you have typically used on patients, like over 10,000 patients, to identify some things that traditional doctors are not seeing, and what are you able to do with that data? So let's talk about that.
Okay, so I think we have to start with one of my favorites, which is the food sensitivity testing.
Yeah.
Because it's never even looked at. And the one that we use, sometimes you'll get IgG or IgE for people that are like anaphylactic to fish, where if they eat fish or peanuts, then their throat closes and they're in danger of dying, right? That's different than what we do.
Yeah.
What we do is we identify foods that are raising inflammation in the body, because inflammation is the cause of just about all of the damage that your body undergoes. So just about every single disease is an inflammatory process and problem, where it has a job in the body that it should be doing for healing, and yet it becomes out of control. Like cancer is an inflammatory disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, just to name like the top big three, right?
Yeah.
They're all based on inflammation. And so there's different reasons and places where that inflammation can come from. And the things that you're putting into your body day to day can either help you or hurt you. I can't remember who said it, but like your food can either be something that supports your wellness or a slowest kind of death. Because, and it's not just, well, I don't eat McDonald's. Well, that's not it. That's not all it. Like you can't eat broccoli, correct? Right? It's like a superfood, one of the best foods on the planet, and yet it increases your inflammation. And so you don't,
Yeah.
And we got to find another place.
Garlic. That's good. For me, you know, as a lover of food, garlic is on my list. So yeah.
Yeah. It can be painful. I was just thinking about it the other night. I'm like, yep, I gave up that. I gave up that. I gave up that. That wasn't even worth it. And, you know, so that's one of the big things. And I think we've talked a lot about that. Another piece, which is really the elephant in the room and is becoming like an integrative medicine and functional medicine, they're really starting to pay a lot of attention, finally, with toxicity, because we are inundated with all of these different toxins from everything. I mean, everything from not only carpets, paint, but perfume. If you're not using an essential oil, perfume is a cancer-causing endocrine disruptive chemical. And people wear it every day. And I used to get perfume every single holiday or, you know, birthday because I loved it so much. And I haven't worn it in years just because it's one of those other ways that you can decrease your body's likelihood of developing some disease process. So we can test those toxins in the body. We can test for heavy metals. We can test for other like volatile chemicals. We can look for glyphosate or Roundup amounts in your body. And then we can detoxify you to get those out so that, you know, this major driver or cause of chronic disease is lessened in your body. I'm starting to explore, because I did integrative oncology and treated patients who were going through chemotherapy and radiation or had opted out in order to support their body to have less symptoms and side effects from those conventional therapies that I'm going to stay away from trash talking about right now. Like the fact that radiation for breast cancer can actually create treatment-resistant cancer stem cells that are then able to metastasize and go to other parts of the body, and then they don't react to radiation or chemotherapy anymore. And so that's mind-blowing. So how about we get rid of all of these estrogenic chemicals that are definitely a cause in, you know, these endocrine or, you know, breast cancer issues, as well as help the body detoxify and heal in a different way. So I'm starting to pay more attention to not only how your genetics handle certain things like hormone cascades and your immune system function and your detoxification processes, but I think it's kind of funny, you know, when you're talking about these labs. Let's take PSA, for example, prostate-specific antigen, which is one of the most ironic names ever, but because one of the highest levels was actually found in a breast cancer patient. So it's not really specific at all, right? Whoops. But like, so you have this range that goes from, you know, like 0.4 to 4, or depends on the lab. And so as you get up higher, once you hit 4, oh, time for a biopsy, time to pay attention, time to worry about this. And so what we want to do is we want to look at, so if you're in the top 75% before you go over, let's look, even if you look at like ovarian cancer markers or like breast cancer markers or GI or endocrine, other issues, right? So if you're in the top 75% of that range, let's look at how are you detoxifying? How are you metabolizing your hormones? Do you have issues genetically that are keeping you from doing this well? So it's not a perfect screen by any means. It's a good baseline though, I think, because then we know, because normal cells can in certain situations make, right? And we all have cancer in our body. Probably even you, Steve, you might have 5 cancer cells while everybody else has 5,000, right? And it takes like 10 to 15 years for a lot of these things to become detectable. And by that time, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, like literally, imagine if you have like your PSA test, it doesn't matter any levels, and let's say in the last 5 years, like it starts here, and let's say this is the normal range, camera, right, normal range right here, and it's gone from like here to here to here to here to here, the doctors will be like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, it's still normal.
Cross the threshold, but it's like
totally normal.
It could have like double, quadruple, right?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, it's fine, because they're looking at like sliced data. Yep.
Yes, it's an algorithm based. And while there's nothing wrong with algorithms, I'd like to change them so they were a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
And preventative.
Yeah, just using more data, right? Like instead of limited, it's still an algorithm, just actually, but now using more data to kind of figure out the algorithm. So.
Right. And so if we run those cancer markers, and even if they're good, and then we run them again in a year as part of your checkup, and they go up, that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny when you said about the cancer cells, like 5, and most people have like 50,000. So yesterday I was in Baltimore speaking to 35 entrepreneurs. And so I bought the S3 scanner. It's like a scanner that measures the carotenoid levels, like antioxidant levels. And so one person maxed out the machine. Like it only goes up to 89,000 and his score is 89,000. So it's Brian, right, partner in this stuff. And yeah, because he's like so on top of his health. It was impressive. Yeah. So when I calculated the group average yesterday of the entrepreneurs, I had to say like his was such an outlier. It skewed the group average up by 5,000. I had to exclude his number to get a true accurate score of the entrepreneurs, which was 34,000 on that score, which is still better. Like the average masses, like everyday population, when we test 25, so they're about 10,000 above the average, but still below that they're still in the slight danger zone on average for people. But anyway, so that was an interesting data point. Yeah, so I think it's, to me, and I think you would agree, it's all about data, right? Just like if we have enough data, we can figure out, I think, everything. And maybe we can talk about like, I've threw out general numbers, right? Which is like the numbers show we can test for about 4,000 different markers right now. And a traditional doctor tests for about 20. And that's, if you think about it, that's like mind blowing. They're using,
but they're all normal, so you're fine.
Yeah. And so there's that. So we can talk about like, so we talked about, some tests that are great. Maybe let's go to the other side, like, what are some tests that they're currently doing that may be actually not showing what it should be showing, right? Like the accuracy of those tests. Maybe we can touch upon that. We've touched upon it in other videos, but I'm assuming that everyone's going back and watching every video.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
So let's talk about thyroid.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep my language clean. So
we're all adults. It's okay.
So when you go and get a thyroid, I'm tired and I just don't have any energy and I'm gaining weight, I'm having some hair loss, maybe my digestion isn't working as well as it should. And so if you twist their arm enough, often they will run a TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, which comes from the pituitary and goes down into the thyroid to stimulate your T4 and T3 production, mostly T4, however. So the TSH is actually like sitting down with my grandmother to get to know me, because from the active form of thyroid is T3. And there's actually a reverse form of T3 that can also feed back in a negative loop to TSH, and so can lower TSH into a normal range and yet be inert in the body. We see this a lot with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, people under chronic stress. A lot of people like with hair loss have elevated reverse T3, and it's almost never checked. So then T3 by itself, or free T3 and free T4, are also very often never checked. And T4 is made in the thyroid about, I guess it's about 80% is made in the thyroid, or what the thyroid makes, 80% is T4, and then it goes out into the tissues and gets converted into T3. If you're under stress, you don't convert to T3 as well. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you don't convert to T3 as well. There's other enzymes like selenium is another thing that's necessary, which a lot of us don't have enough selenium because our foods don't contain enough of it to really help everything in the body, because selenium is also needed for detoxification in the liver, and it's a very important piece of hormone synthesis, especially in the prostate, etc. So why would you just look at TSH? Because it's not even what matters. And yet people, then there's the range, right? So it's like 0.45 to 4.5.
Right.
If you're 4.4, you're totally fine. Normal, come back in 3 months, we'll test again. So then what's going to happen in 3 months? If you don't do anything, well, you're probably going to get worse. And then at 4.5, maybe 4.6, here's your prescription.
Yeah, last night, entrepreneur, hair loss, fatigue, 40 pounds weight gain, recent stress, that everything was fine.
Everything's fine. And so if your everything is fine. So if your TSH is over 2, I know that it's struggling. And so that's when we can do things that can support the proper functioning of the thyroid gland, so you don't necessarily have to go on a replacement hormone. There's been a huge upsurge in hypothyroid in babies in California since 2011. It's increased 30%. We're getting hit with a lot of the radiation from Fukushima. And so I think that's another, because people's thyroids are not well. I've got 2 brothers in Southern California where a lot of that stream hits, and both of them are having issues. Because in the Cold War, with bomb shelters in the bottom of the house, right, what was kept in there to protect the thyroid? Potassium iodide, because radioactive iodine replaces the healthy iodine in the thyroid. And so you take iodine to keep it functioning, otherwise you die. And so where do we get iodine in our diet here? Well, kelp, maybe, seafood, which we're not supposed to eat because it's so toxic, and iodized salt, which everybody's so scared of eating because that salt's going to raise their blood pressure, which is another crazy thing. So taking a little bit of iodine can really be fantastic. The other test that goes really well with the thyroid is adrenal testing. And in convention, we'll run like an 8 a.m. morning cortisol to see where you are in the morning when you wake up in the blood. Nice. I like your picture, Steve. I can't wait to find out what's in that.
Protein, cinnamon, cloves, and
sounds good. I love clove. I think clove is like an under-championed, awesome powerhouse of an herb. It's like
the ORAC scoring charts. It's amazing.
It's awesome. It's good. We can talk about that next time. But so cortisol, you can, if you're in the hospital, sometimes they will run a 4 blood test cortisol, because what happens to cortisol, it goes up in the morning to wake you up, and then it should go down over the day in a circadian rhythm. So if you just look in the morning, that's just like, it's like having a screenshot of a movie, right? And so then if you're in the hospital, you can get those 4 blood draws. Or if you want to camp out at a phlebotomist, then you can get those 4 blood draws to get more of an idea of the curve. But what convention usually does, if they think that there's an adrenal issue, is they give you a 24-hour urine assessment. And you pee in a bucket for 24 hours, and then they just take the total cortisol that you excrete and say, well, that total cortisol is in range, so you've got to be fine. It doesn't give any kind of idea about what the curve is doing. And I've seen reversed curves. I've seen super high and then boom, or just kind of like very, very low level with no real jump in the beginning. And so it's nuts. And I don't do a whole lot of salivary testing, because I think that, it depends on good lymph function. It depends on how well hydrated you are. But salivary cortisol is something that I do because it's the most convenient to get a pretty good idea of what's going on, especially with the four tests. I actually have one that does 5 for people that wake up in the middle of the night, because then we want to know, like, why are you waking up in the middle of the night? And so you can do that one, and then you've got 4 others during the day to see what the curve's really doing.
It's funny, once you explain it, it makes complete sense. Like, you may want to test interval instead of dumping it all on the average. But I
want to talk about, so this is like one of my favorite subjects, Steve. I could talk a long time about this. Lipid testing. Oh my God. It's so bad. I mean, no wonder cardiovascular disease kills more Americans than anything else, because it's so bad, both in assessment and management. So your total cholesterol numbers mean very, 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 very little. Even if you look at your LDL, or your bad cholesterol, combined with your HDL, which is supposedly your healthy cholesterol, and then you can look at ratios and things and triglycerides. That's what the usual lipid panel looks at. And then they'll give you a statin drug to lower that LDL. But a lot of times the statin drug actually raises the small, dense particles that are more likely to get into the lining of the vessels and cause plaque. And what causes heart attacks and stroke? Plaque. And most of the time, LDL treatment plans like statin drugs do not decrease plaque. And so we look at whether there's plaque being formed. We look at what size and shape your particles are. Are they big, fluffy beach balls, or are they small little baseballs? Because that matters. And then we have natural substances that we can give to help remove plaque from the vessels, as well as change the way that the particles are sized.
Yeah. It's I remind patients that I believe it's like 64% of people who have heart attacks, and your doctor is just doctor. So there's something else going on.
Well, the 52-year-old head of the American Heart Association had a heart attack about a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, they knew he lived, but they knew he was at risk. He had a familial health risk. He did their therapies, and he still had a heart attack.
Yeah, again, it goes back to this system. Operating outdated.
Yep.
So those are some things that we know just really doesn't work. What about? So let's go back. Someone wanted to find out their cardiovascular risk. Who would that test?
Okay, so we run. We look at the LP-PLAC, which is an enzyme that is released when plaque is being formed in the arteries, so we can look at that. We look at the size and shape of the particles. We look at the particle number. We look at omega fatty acids, because one of the accepted ways to lower cholesterol in a healthy way is using healthy fats. And they're also very anti-inflammatory. So we look at whether you're getting enough, because a lot of people are taking fish oil, but are they taking a good enough form? Are they absorbing it? And are the levels appropriate for their body? And so we look at that. We look at high sensitivity CRP to look and see about the inflammation in the vessels, homocysteine for a similar reason to see about the oxidative stress. Those are the big ones, but because diabetes is a major driver of cardiovascular disease, then we also look at those metabolic risks. Like, what is your glucose? I'll tell you what, if your glucose fasted in the 90s, that's not good. I mean, I want to see it in the 80s or lower, because that shows better glycemic control. And when we look at longevity, one of the best things to do for longevity is to manage your blood sugar. Right? And so if you're in the 90s, that means that we have got to get your insulin sensitivity better. We've got to see what we can do in your diet. And then we can also run a score looking at the insulin in relation to your glucose, in relation to your hemoglobin A1C, and see what's the likelihood of you becoming diabetic in the future. And so sometimes people are like, oh, whew, okay, let's really do something now. I've got to give up the, martinis or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that we're in a time technology medicine where we can measure these things and be like you're at or low risk of X, Y, and Z. Versus currently, let's wait until you then do something about it.
Right. Yeah. And then we can look at, vitamin D too. And a lot of doctors are running vitamin D now. But optimal levels of vitamin D are between 60 and 80. And a lot of people aren't even close to that. And so you may be normal, but are you optimal?
Yeah, and there's kind of this bunch of what variation in the body that that's not being done. So, are there any other like cardiovascular markers? Maybe did we talk about cancer marker? We talked a little about cancer.
So as far as the cancer markers go, there's markers that you can look at for like ovarian cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. There's even some for thyroid. There's the CEA, which is chorionic chorionic embryonic antigen or cancer embryonic antigen, which is a GI risk risk factor, and it shows that if you have like GI mutations, like colon cancer or esophageal, things like that. So those are some of the big ones.
Yeah, and so these are again doctors wouldn't. How
I'm sorry, Steve, you're breaking up.
Yep. These are tests. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So these are tests that wouldn't run. Like what's the from a predicted value, early or not value. In general, talk about how relate this is the traditional way. Yeah.
For the cancer detection?
Yeah, like it's ability to detect tumor, how early versus tumor.
I mean, if you get regular tumor markers and we see the progression, right? So if you're in the top 75%, that's something for us. It's not that we're going to be able to say, oh, you know, in 3 years, you're going to have it, right? Because there's a little bit of wiggle room. But if we get it and you're in the top 75%, that tells us we need to look a little bit deeper and see why, and then address that why, and then retest and see where is that number. And so I think that by themselves, they're kind of like a warning light, you know, and then I mean, we could find things with that warning light and prevent, you know, something that could be found in 10 years or more. Does that make sense?
Yep. Perfect. So what would be other things that would be the highest percent?
So let's take breast cancer. Breast cancer is really commonly associated with hormones, right? Either progesterone or estrogen. You can have, you know, estrogen receptor positive cancers. And so if you have that risk, you know, or a higher cancer number, and then you either have a family history of it or you don't, then we can look at your fractionated estrogens, which are E1, E2, and E3. E1 is a major driver of cancers. It's like the most active, it's the most aggressive. And so if you have higher ranges of that as opposed to estradiol or estriol, then that's more dangerous. And then we can look at the pathway. We can build out a pathway that shows how are you metabolizing all of these things? Where is there a backup in the enzyme system? And why is it shunting to create more of this other one? Is it an environmental toxicity? And if so, then we can test for that and we can make sure that we detoxify that out. Is it a genetic issue? Can you take that genetic piece and then make sure that you're getting enough DIM and getting enough, you know, liver support in order to, and even minerals and vitamins to help that enzyme system work a little bit better so that it's chugging away and metabolizing better that way. And so like there's the genetic piece, there's the toxicity piece, and then there's the hormonal cascade piece. And with all of those, we can take that tumor marker kind of like a warning light. And, you know, it's not perfect, but it's a good way, I think, to see, like, are there things that are lurking on? There's a reason we should look under the surface and make sure that your body is working as optimally as possible to really significantly decrease this cancer risk down the road. And we can do that 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, some genetic cancers, like in kids, I mean, that's another story. But like,
yeah, the common one, like breast cancer, thyroid cancer, prostate cancer,
colon, endometrial, cervical, yeah, even lung.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the ones that you can find things early, find why this, and then resolve the things. Yeah. So maybe that was great for for the guys, like through prostate cancer. Like, what are some typical? What are some common tests for?
Okay, so like prostate, like we would run a PSA, like we run PSAs with all of our male panels.
Yep.
And then depending on where it is, as well as, you know, the age of the person, I mean, I think every man who doesn't have a food sensitivity to it should be eating pumpkin seeds, raw pumpkin seeds, because it's kind of funny. The pumpkin has bioflavonoids in it that are very, very good for the prostate health. It also has selenium. And so that selenium is also very good for prostate health. But if we are looking at the prostate levels and they're going up more and more and more every year, why? And then we can look at what is your what's your activated testosterone? What's your sex hormone binding globulin? What's your free testosterone levels? Where's your total? And then we can also run a similar cascade effect looking at, toxicity has a role in this, but a lot of times it's more why are you activating your testosterone so aggressively? Do we need to give you a delta-5 desaturase inhibitor in a herbal form so that you're not activating your testosterone quite as quickly, which is good in some ways, but it has negative side effects as well. And so, as always, men are a little bit less complicated, but as you look at the hormone cascades, and you have to look at toxicity in every way. You have to, just because it's a major driver and it's just clouding the picture in different ways. And so the genetic piece of it, though, too, especially if prostate cancer runs in families, then we can look at the hormone metabolism, what's going on, how do we support that, what foods can you eat, what supplements can you take.
So just so people don't know the reason why we're going to and how cloud is. Right, the average number right now is between 500 and we just don't know. Right, because there's just no testing. Let alone what happens if you jump together in one.
No idea. No concept. And there's information coming out of Europe where they're doing research and they're saying, well, way lower amounts of chemicals that we have deemed as safe are actually quite dangerous to your body and your health. And they're like exponential when they're together.
There was a study. Part in water and change the sex of male frost at one part. If it's like one drop of this in a billion drops was enough. The sex of incredible.
And you have to think, this is one of my favorite factoids because I think it's so mind blowing. We're basically the same age, and in our lifetime, worldwide sperm counts have dropped 50%. That's environmental.
Of course.
It's because of all the estrogens and the plastics and the pesticides and all of these other chemicals that we don't even know what they do. 50%?
So that's assuming at the rate it's to all fertile by 30 or something. Maybe recent.
Right.
They're just tracking it.
Yep. So the infertility is going down, autism's going up, cancer rates are going to pass, cancer death is going to pass, cardiovascular death in 2020, I think, right? 2 years. 1 year.
It's, those are just awesome.
And the thing is, we can get them out. That's the thing. We can get them out. And we can teach you how to avoid them for the most part. Not perfectly, because you don't have control over the sky and you don't have control over radiation.
You live in a bubble.
And the bubble would probably be plastic.
Right. A glass bubble.
Right.
It's neurotoxicity. And just to call on that note, which is we can pull but that's not the detox program. Just fast for 2 days, or just drink lemon water. All the cleanses out there, they don't work.
No, I mean, usually what those do is they cause you to burn fat. And a lot of these toxins are caught in fat. And so you will start to detox out of the fat because you're losing fat cells. But most of us can't detoxify in our liver well enough because we're deficient in the nutrients needed to do that. You need magnesium and selenium and a lot of your activated B complexes, and the liver is already inundated with, vodka and, prescription drugs, and, whatever else, it's trying to churn through. And so if you just stir that pot, you can actually get sicker and feel worse because you start mobilizing these things that the body has insulated in fat because it doesn't know what to do with it because it's so dangerous. And then you're just like, oh, you're free. And it goes, and it can actually cause more problems. If you're dehydrated, it's a problem. If you're constipated, it's a problem. And so we support all of those different pieces so that people are able to mobilize these toxins. Like we have someone that just finished actually, and he had a history of being in a dry cleaning and a rug cleaning business. And so like all of those, which are the worst, all of those chemicals were causing, I think, a significant issue. And so he went through the detox for 30 days and just about every single thing he was complaining of is gone. Gone.
Magic.
The magic of data and science.
The magic of data
and nature.
And just having faith in things that our bodies can heal. All we're doing is removing the obstacles. Right, and so just other way of looking. No, works so much. Awesome. So end the call here. As usual. So again, if you're watching this live or not live, questions or comment for the question. Again, for the call, I'm relying on here to basically post. Again, we can talk about So you're at the session. Go below. Some information. Hear from you. This will be interactive. Only. I love talking all day. Obviously, we promise it's interactive. Right. So on that note, we're gonna end the broadcast, and we will talk.
Bye bye.